Alright, so today's going to be another bite-sized video, but this time it's going to mainly focus on the Wraithcallers and everybody's favorite enemy, the Revenants. Now, admittedly, there's not a whole lot of info about these guys, but like in many From Software games, they give you just enough to make your own interpretations and inferences based on what they give us, what little they give us. So let's start with the Wraithcallers. They're said to worship the Revenants, so they're the lesser of the two, obviously based on their size. Now, they're called Wraithcallers because they call Wraiths. Yeah, crazy, I know. By that I mean they use like a sort of evil version of the spirit calling bell called the Wraith calling bell, and they ring it and Wraiths come and home in on whatever they're targeted. And Wraiths themselves, of course, are the swirling mass of blackish gold fire that sort of look like humanity sprites, but there's no discernible figure, they're just a swirling ball. And they are the vengeful spirits of the cursed ones who died and weren't able to return to the Erd Tree, either from being omens or from being murdered and defiled by the loathsome George R.R. Martin. Now, the exact relationship between Wraithcallers and Wraiths is kind of unclear. They seem to just use Wraiths as weapons, in a similar manner to the omens, or at least the ones that didn't have their horns cut off, as they appear to have the ability to breathe a whole breath of Wraiths. A similar attack to Scouring Black Flame, but with Wraiths. Possibly meaning that these Wraiths live within these horned omens. Now, some may say that the flame is similar to the one breathed by the ulcerated tree spirit, or the ones that the Mausoleum Knights buff their weapons in. But I would say that these are all the Prince of Death Flames, as they all cause Deathblight, and there isn't any omens that are capable of causing Deathblight besides the really weird one that happens to be hanging out at the Minor Erd Tree near the Hermit Shack. They can cast Fia's Mist. Anyway, back to the Wraithcallers. So they're like these spider-like beings who appear to be some form of undead, as healing magic seems to harm them. Now, I saw a video from Zoli the Witch that stated that the Wraithcallers' extra limbs appear to be more natural and not grafted on like the grafted Scions or Godfrey and Godefroy. I've also seen comments claiming that because the healing magic doesn't hurt grafted Scions or them, that there could be no relation between the two. Now, I think lore-wise, the Wraithcallers themselves have a lot more to do with Liurnia and the Sorcerers and possibly even the Carians, because there's ones at the Lunar Estates. I think they have a good deal of connection with Leyndell and the Golden Lineage. For example, the Golden Lineage Evergil, that houses Godfrey the Golden, who was defeated by Dragon Knight Kristoff, is guarded by a few Wraithcallers, along with some vulgar militiamen, so they could have just been hired for the job. But I do think it's interesting how a bunch of multi-armed creatures are guarding a boss who also has multiple arms, and I think that the fact that Godfroy and Godric aren't harmed by healing magic has to do with the fact that they're both alive, and that I think that the Wraithcallers and Revenants are dead. They're sort of undead. I mean, it's literally in the Revenant's name, but we'll get to that later. Anyway, there's multiple things that suggest that they are undead. There's their blue skin, which could be just their actual skin color, but it could also mean that they're dead. I personally think it's possible that these Wraithcallers are sort of like these living manifestations of all the people who were sacrificed for grafting, but that could, easily be proven wrong probably. Just a theory. The Wraithcallers themselves can be found in a large quantity over in Liurnia by the Laskiar ruins, I think I'm pronouncing that right. But anyway, there's a bunch of them there led by a Revenant. There's also several more in the Leyndell sewers, also accompanied by a Revenant. The ones there appear to be sharing a similar fate to that of the omens, in that they're imprisoned down there, although much deeper and at the bottom of a pit, and they also don't seem too bothered by it either. Honestly, the only thing that does bother these guys is the healing magic. Like, it looks like it's violently pulling them apart while they writhe on the ground in pain. It's pretty cool. I think my personal disliking of this enemy just comes from the clerics of the Ringed City, both the shellback ones and the fast-running ones. Hated them both. Yeah, they're easy to kill, but sometimes I just want to run through an area and they just fall from the fucking ceiling perfectly sometimes. Anyway, next we've got the strange connection to the Carians in that they inhabit the Lunar Estate ruins. There's also the fact that with the deep blue skin and the multiple arms that they sort of resemble Randy's mentor. Some people have even attested that this confirms that her mentor was a Wraithcaller, and I was one of these people like 4 months ago. Now I don't think so. I think her mentor was the moon. that manifested itself as a snowy witch. They also ride around on these malnourished steeds, not quite as malnourished as Radons, but they don't look too good. One interesting thing about them is that they have horns, and a lot of people have alleged that, oh, okay, so Torrent is the same species as them, and maybe at one point they were the same species as Torrent, but there's clearly some differences. Maybe they're like undead versions of whatever species Torrent is. But these horseback ones are capable of producing fog from like a lantern, I believe. Or maybe it's just that their ghostly steed produces it. I just know that they can create more fog, which probably explains why the marshlands of Liurnia, at least near those ruins, are particularly foggy and filled with Wraithcallers. But I've talked enough about the worshippers. Let's talk about the being worshipped, the Revenants. Now, Revenant, I think, means like a vengeful spirit that's come back to get revenge or something like that. But I always just think of the ones from Dragon Age Origins. Very iconic look they had. Nothing like the spazzing out spiders with a fucking screaming face and wearing a crown that are capable of vomiting a lake of poison for like a mile. Poison that not only builds up the poison meter, but also physically damages you. They're capable of teleporting through these weird black and gold fiery little portals that spawn on the ground. They crawl out of them from seemingly another dimension. I mean, they use them in combat, but they also appear to just rest in this teleport dimension, or maybe they're just invisible. But it looks like they come out of the ground from some fiery pocket dimension. The Wraithcallers themselves are also able to portal in from this pocket dimension, but they don't seem to be able to combat teleport in the way that the Revenants can. They just appear to hide in it, emerging only when they can ambush somebody. Now these things are just found in the worst places. There's one found in the King's Realm ruins, which is an actual fully fledged mini-boss, and his placement there is kind of interesting because it's right there by Caria Manor, and we know that that area was sacked by the Cuckoo Knights, who were then driven off from the manor by the artillery. So one could make the assumption that he fought for the Cuckoo Knights or the Cuckoo Forces. But I think the name Royal seems to imply that he served the Carians. The one at Laskiar Ruins, along with his Wraithcaller worshippers, appears to be guarding a portal to the Ray Lucarian Academy, or at least the front gate of it. It's possible they're guarding it for the sorcerers or the Cuckoo Forces, but I suppose it's also possible that they may have created it as a sort of secret entrance into the academy or to bypass the lake to get to the academy, but that's rather unclear and probably not very likely. Regardless though, this portal is one of the few connections between the sorcerers and the Wraithcallers that I mentioned earlier. Outside of that, lore-wise, I can't seem to place these guys other than the fact that they're worshipped by the Wraithcallers and might have served the Carians in some capacity and might have been the ones that taught grafting to the Golden Lineage. Or maybe somewhere down the line, members of the Golden Lineage began grafting because of Godfrey's grafting of Siraj, and over time it turned into grafting like we see with the grafted scions, a process that likely had several failed attempts. And I believe that the Revenants are these failed attempts coming back to life. Appearance-wise, they sort of just look like big Wraithcallers, but they've got this gaping open chest, which is similar to the Dragonkin soldiers of the Nox cities, whose open stomachs I find rather off-putting. And of course, my favorite enemies in the game, the trolls with their root-like hair and their PS5 discless edition that's embedded deep in the gaping chest cavity and covered in roots. The open chest cavity seems to be a reoccurring theme in this game, and it was in other games too. I mean, there was the whole giant hole in the armor with the Ring Knight set in Dark Souls 3, and there was the Giants of Dark Souls 2 whose face was just a void. I also think it's possible that members of the Golden Lineage were just led astray by Wraithcallers. Like they twisted the idea of grafting for them, and maybe even got them to worship Revenants too. Again, since this whole video is based on something that has very little lore that's set in stone, it's going to be a lot of me just theorizing and saying, well, maybe. Which I find fun, but tomorrow's video will be about the 2 dragon cults, and that one will be less maybe, because there's a lot of lore for both of those groups. Anyway though, the Revenants are probably one of the most hated enemies in the game because of their spazzing out attacks, and they're really only found in a few places, usually flanked by a bunch of Wraithcallers. A good example would be the courtyard of the Shaded Castle, where there is a Revenant and a horsebacked Wraithcaller who will ambush you. It's also a great spot to test out the healing magic, killing them a trick. The ones that live here at the Shaded Castle are probably former prisoners of its dungeon that were broken free when Elmer led a riot with all the depraved perfumers and all that. And I'd be super irritated with myself if I didn't mention what I call the cursed strip in this video about revenants. Now, even if you're skilled at fighting these things, which, I mean, some people really are, you know, some people take these. Sometimes I get super lucky and whoop these things without them getting a hit off on me. But in the Howling Tree, on the way to what I believe is Radagon's Scar Seal or his Sore Seal, it's at the bottom, not in any of the upper balconies or walkways, at the very bottom. And if you look down there, you'll see a Revenant or two patrolling. Now, when you go down there and you take that one out maybe from afar, it might just teleport onto one of the rafters and smack you, or you get lucky, it'll just die. And you drop down there, you kill those two, and just, it's endless Revenant after Revenant. If you happen to jump or dodge the wrong way, another one might just appear out of the ground and start smacking you. I just remember that it was not a fun stretch to go through, and I've only gone back there once, and it was for this video, so there's really no purpose of going down there. I think you need that talisman for the achievement, so once you get it once, you don't need to ever get it again. There's really no reason to ever go down there. These things vomit fucking poison across the whole stretch. If you dodge left, right, forward, back, you're still dodging into more poison. It's fucking ridiculous. But I think that's all I had to say about those two things for today, because, you know, at the risk of rambling on and on about maybes, that's really all the information I could find about Wraithcallers and Revenants. But if you liked that video, please like. If you didn't like it, please dislike. And if you like hearing me ramble on and on and on, please consider subscribing. That would really help me out. And the next video will definitely be about the Dragon Cults, followed by my Q&A, or maybe the Q&A will come before it. It's really tough to say. And then the long-awaited Ranny video. So let's leave on a good note.